Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 1-0 podcast. I'm Joel Haas.
I'm Avery Hill.
I'm Lexie Linderman.
Today, we're going to be recapping the NFL Draft. We're also going to be talking a little bit of the transfer portal, and then we're going to take some questions from you guys. So to start, I think the biggest storyline from the draft is that Penn State didn't necessarily do as well as we expected them to. It was still a pretty good draft overall for the team, but just in number of players taken and also where they went, I felt like it didn't live up to expectations. Is that kind of what you guys noticed?
I mean, honestly, I think it was up and down in terms of, expectations because at first you have, Chop and Olu come off the board. Obviously, Olu first. Olu slid back a little bit from where we initially thought he would go, but still good value based on where he was going into the draft. I mean, Chop, I think that was a really good value for him. I think he was close to falling out of the first round, but he ends up going early 20s. But even you have guys like Adisa, you might have seen some people thought he was going second round. I thought he was going second round, but
Right.
And then you got Caden Wallace. I thought he would go about fourth, fifth round. He went third round, pretty good pick for him. And then you can go all the way to the bottom of the board where you have Curtis Jacobs going undrafted, Kalen King falling to the seventh round. So I think it was a little bit all around. It was up and down for just everyone involved, but I think overall it wasn't a bad draft for Penn State.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting, last week we talked, we fully thought it was going to be 9 or 10, and so 8 was kind of a shock. What shocks me the most is, Johnny Dixon still is a free agent, didn't get drafted, still an undrafted free agent, hasn't signed anywhere, which is kind of surprising to me because I feel like, compared to Daquan and Kalen, I thought he honestly would go the highest, so that's a bit of a shock. And then also I was shocked Theo dropped all the way to the 4th. I mean, the Giants got a steal there, especially because they need a tight end, but I really thought he was going to be a second or third, especially after that combine performance.
Yeah, because I think even off of that, the tight end talent in this draft class wasn't that good. You didn't really have those top-tier tight ends. So I think a team with a need, I thought he would have easily went second round, especially looking in past years. And Penn State's history of tight ends, I thought that he easily could have been a second-round guy. But I also think sometimes sliding isn't the worst thing. Outside of the money, sliding isn't the worst thing ever. Even if you look in the first round, guys that go later in the first round go to better teams. Chop is in a really good situation being in Miami with Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Shaq Barrett. That's a really good situation for him. And even the guys on the back end, or even Curtis Jacobs, who went undrafted, well, at that point, knowing that he was a day 3, early, mid-day 3 type of guy, he's going to have teams. Teams are going to be calling. So he has his pick. And he goes to the defending champions. He goes to a team that already has Nick Bolton and guys like that to really mentor him and get him to where he needs to be. So I think it's not always a terrible thing outside of the money and, sitting there with your family all day wondering, am I really going to get this call?
Yeah, Curtis falling was crazy to me. I was sitting there watching, getting ready for him to get taken, 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Somehow goes all the way out. Goes undrafted. I know ESPN, they have their best available players, and he was sitting at number 1.
For a minute, yeah.
He was up at best available the whole time, and no one wanted him. But I mean, like you mentioned, he ends up with the Chiefs, so he'll probably get a ring or two before.
Yeah, regardless,
before
player or
it's
not,
over.
that's a ring. Even practice squad, that's a ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Keaton Ellis ends up with the Titans. That was a little bit unexpected, at least for me, and then Trey Potts to the Chiefs as well. So there were 3 Nittany Lions going to the Chiefs, which is kind of funny. The other one being Hunter Norzad, who actually went a little bit higher than I thought he would. 5th round to the Chiefs. A lot of Penn State players heading to Kansas City there. But yeah, overall, I just thought they did worse than I was expecting. I know we were kind of debating last week, are they going to have 9? Are they going to have 10? They end up with 8. And Curtis Jacobs really the big surprise, I would say. So that was kind of unexpected there. But at the end of the day, still sending 8 players to the league. Ties for the most under James Franklin. Tied for second most since the draft moved to 7 rounds. So still a pretty successful draft overall for Penn State. And even looking ahead to next year, I think it could be even better. Kind of depending on how next season goes. There's some guys like Aller, for example. If he has a good season, he could end up going really high. I've seen him at first round in some mock drafts.
Yeah.
So
it depends where you look. I mean, I think that they have a lot of guys with that first, second round potential, but that is something that also happens a lot in college football before the season starts.
Yep.
Everything's fine until the pads come on, and then guys are falling to 5, 6, 7 round, So I
Yeah,
think
I mean, we saw with
Yeah,
with
yeah,
King.
with King.
yeah. That's prime example. So, I mean, I think that right now you see guys like, I think him, Abdul Carter, Deny, even I've seen KJ Winston going in the first round, which is very likely with the trajectory that he's on. It's a really good chance. And I think that even you have guys below that can really make their mark and make their way up. So I think this year will be a really good prover year for Penn State and putting guys in the draft in really good positions.
Yeah, for sure. I know you mentioned KJ. That one's kind of that one caught me by surprise.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest. When I first saw that, it kind of makes sense the more you think about it. Just kind of the trajectory he's been on. Had a pretty big year this past season. Did some good stuff. Showed some signs. Obviously, it was more of a competitive room, and now he'll be kind of like penciled in as the starter this season full time. But yeah, I mean, they've got some guys who could go really high in the draft. Drew, KJ could be first rounders. Abdul Carter could be a first rounder. Even Deny Dennis Sutton, who hasn't, I don't think he started a game yet, but he should be a starter this year at defensive end. He could be up in that first round conversation. So there's a lot of guys up there. Penn State could have a really good draft next year. I mean, this was a good draft, but next year could be a lot better. That could be Franklin's best, and that could be the one where we see 9 or 10 picks, kind of what we thought we would get from this year's. So, I don't know. It is interesting that the guys who opted out of the Peach Bowl pretty much all saw their stock fall.
Yeah.
You can argue whether or not you think it's related, but I mean, King, Dixon didn't play. Some of the other guys, Olu didn't play, Chop didn't play, and then some of the other guys like Theo only played, parts of the first half, were pretty limited. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know. Do you guys think that made a difference, or do you think it just kind of happened that way?
I think it made a difference for Kalen and Johnny. I don't know about anyone else. I think Olu was pretty penciled in first round.
That's true, yeah.
Same with Chop. And I think Theo, honestly, I don't know how much they would have seen anyway. Like, it was more his combine and pro day that kind of shot him up. His stock shot up from that. But so I think it was more Kalen and Johnny that kind of took a hit from it. I definitely think they could have proved something against that high-powered Ole Miss offense, but they just decided they didn't want to. And Johnny Dixon ended up getting hurt at the Senior Bowl anyway. So,
Yeah, and even for my thing with Kalen, I think the problem is he didn't have enough to show in 2023 to get him to sit out. His stock was sliding because his tape was bad. That's what it is. And we knew he was not going to test well. We knew he wasn't a really fast guy. He's more of a press physical corner. So how else are you going to prove yourself except for against Ole Miss, who I call a wide receiver powerhouse, kind of sneaky one, but definitely a wide receiver powerhouse. Playing in the SEC, there's not a better spot to prove yourself, and I think that will serve as a lesson, not just to them, but to teams around the country or players around the country that your work isn't done. You have to play that last game, or your stock can just fall and you have no control over it. I would rather at least be able to control my destiny with that final game and put out a really, really good tape than just sit out and see what happens if I'm not one of those locks.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, especially for Kalen, because you mentioned Ole Miss is a huge opportunity for him to kind of prove against a good receiving core, what he's capable of. Because you look at the other big games, Ohio State, I mean, he was getting cooked by Marvin Harrison. And then Michigan didn't really pass the ball, so we didn't get to – I guess we'll never know. But you go into Ole Miss, you think, this is a chance to actually prove yourself against one of the better receiving cores. Because outside of Ohio State, there's really not much in the Big Ten. Not many tough tests for the secondary there. And opts out against Ole Miss, I think that really could have helped or hurt, depending on how the game went. But it would have definitely changed his draft stock. And same thing with Dixon, where he even right now still doesn't even have a team, which is still, it's kind of mind-blowing to me. Like, I thought he would get drafted.
Yeah.
And it's not over. He could still get a camp invite or late, undrafted signing, but the fact that he has nothing right now is a little it's concerning. It's concerning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's the injury, because he got hurt during the Reese's Senior Bowl. He came down in the end zone and hurt his hip, and I don't know.
But even an injury shouldn't take you all the way out. Usually it's got to be something on tape, honestly, because with injuries, guys or teams still take a chance. Like you look at Clemson when they had Justin Ross. Justin Ross was an absolute star, but his back really ruined things. But at the end of the day, he got a chance with the Chiefs. Like guys like that, Dixon could see himself getting that chance, but right now he hasn't got it. So there's a reason. I think it's more than just injury.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe he ends up in the UFL.
Yeah. UFL, CFL.
He'll get
He'll be playing football, I think,
right.
unless he just doesn't want to, which I doubt seriously.
Maybe he'll join John Lovett. Have you seen John Lovett? He's been tearing it up with the Brahmas, dude. 4 touchdowns in 3 weeks. Get this man in the NFL. He's been on a tear. All right, I guess we can kind of move on from that. So the next topic we want to touch on is the transfer portal. It closed Tuesday night at midnight for undergraduates, and then for graduate students, they have until Wednesday night at midnight. But for the most part, it's basically closed. I don't think Penn State's going to see anyone else enter. And the rules for that are actually weird. I found out today, you don't have to actually enter by the deadline. Yeah. You just have to declare your intent to enter. So, if you text your head coach and you say, I plan to enter the portal, but you don't, officially fill out the paperwork and enter it by the deadline, you can still enter it once it closes, which is so goofy to me because you can just text them.
Yeah.
And then at any point during the summer, you can technically still enter as long as you've declared your intent, whatever that means. Yeah. But I don't know. It's effectively closed. We'll say it's closed. So Penn State right now, 4 players enter in the spring window. The most notable is Keandre Lambert-Smith. They also lose Malik Mega. So 2 receivers entering the portal at a position that they kind of needed help in, Penn State probably would have liked to bring in some guys instead of losing guys. So, they're not going to like that. And then the other 2, Jordan Vandenberg, Devon Townley, defensive linemen, didn't really play much. I don't think that makes much of an impact on the depth chart. Yeah. They weren't projected to start or anything like that. So, the biggest loss, Keandre Lambert-Smith, we've talked a little bit about that before. But, 4 players entering the portal and only one of them with starting experience that's pretty good, all things considered.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Because we saw teams, Colorado, I'm going to call them out, Colorado, everyone left. I saw, out of the commitments and transfers they brought in last year, 2023, 61% of them are now gone.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They lost a lot.
The whole team is just leaving. There's so much stuff, dude. Shitter and Coach Prime are just going off
back
on
and
Twitter.
Forth on Twitter. Twitter's crazy. Pulling up the stats. Oh, what he had? Dude had, 4 pass deflections. Then he pulled up his son's stats. But I was looking at his son's stats. I'm like, but Shiloh has 4 forced fumbles and 60 tackles. But hey, that's just me.
No, that's so funny. I've been keeping up with that. That's wild. We've just never seen.
I've never seen a coach go after opposing players like that. That's one thing I've just never seen.
Or even his own players, calling them out.
His own
player.
Ethic,
no, the whole thing's crazy. But Penn State, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, where you're not really losing much, which I think that's symbolic of kind of the culture there.
Yeah.
Sure. You don't have guys running. Guys want to stay and compete. Part of that, I would say, has to do with NIL as well, because players are definitely looking at how much money they can make
for sure
at other schools, and I think Penn State, I would give credit to the coaching staff for that, just being able to retain the guys that they retain. They didn't bring in anyone the spring window. Everyone they brought in came in the winter window, but they did, they did bring in some guys. Then so, some notable guys obviously with Harrison Fleming, Rucci, even Kimber, all guys who could play a role. So overall, I think net positive in the portal. I think they gained more than they lost. And it's kind of closed now. They don't really have to worry about that until the end of next season. The portal doesn't open again. There's the loophole, like I said. So, maybe, Nick Singleton's about to hop in. Who knows? But, as of now, we're going to act like, it's closed. And they kind of got out without really any major issues. Keandre leaves. They bring in Fleming. Kind of cancels out, I feel like. You would have liked to keep Keandre. And I think if you're Penn State, you would have wanted to bring someone in. But they can still – I mean, they can still add someone.
You can still add players. You just
right.
No one can, technically leave if they haven't declared already.
Right.
So, I mean, that's possible. But, I mean, I do think at the same time they would have wished to get more players because I think this is the hot part of the portal where guys are transferring because spots are filling up, spots are leaving. I think it'll be a little harder to recruit come May and June and however long they can recruit. And then you kind of look at the new teams coming in. You got Oregon, their recruiting powerhouse. With or without Dan Lanning, that's a powerhouse. You're not beating them. That's just not going to happen. Ohio State, same thing. You're really not going to beat them, and they're really good coaching-wise, especially you look at that defensive line. Michigan, that's one team you're not really going to worry about portal-wise. They like to keep everything within, so you're not really competing with them in terms of the portal. But as long as Penn State likes what it has going into next season, I think they're in a really good position in terms of what they lost in the portal, which is almost nothing.
Yeah. I mean, there's still some guys out there that they can go and get.
Yeah.
I think receiver is a position you're looking at, but we also keep seeing that they're like way over the scholarship limit.
Yeah.
It's 85, and I think last I saw they have 95 players who are on scholarship, and
something like that. Yeah.
They're going to need to like cut that down pretty significantly. And, sometimes players transferring out isn't always a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
If there were, guys who weren't going to contribute, who are just kind of taking up that scholarship, Penn State needs to find a way to get down to the limit. There are kind of ways around that where you can, NIL kind of plays a role where you can
NIL,
pay for guys.
Walk on, but under the table, they're on a full ride, things like that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. I mean, they can't lose anyone to the portal now, but I guess they have to pool scholarships or kind of get creative with that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there because, I think there's still 10, 12 players over. Which is interesting. But, I mean, you talked about recruiting a little bit. I do kind of want to go into that. Not much has happened recently as far as players committing, but where we stand so far for 2025, Penn State, third in the Big Ten behind, you mentioned Ohio State and Oregon.
Yeah.
Michigan's actually way down there. I think they were like 12th or something in the Big Ten right now, which is kind of crazy. I mean, I know Harbaugh left, and I don't think Harbaugh was putting too much effort into recruiting before he left to the Chargers. So it's kind of, I don't think they had much in the class before he left. So Sharon Moore kind of got thrown in last minute there. But, I mean, they're way behind a lot of the other Big Ten teams. They also, I think they only have 6 commitments right now in 2025, which is a lot less than everyone else. So that was surprising to me. But, I mean, Penn State, you don't necessarily have to build through the portal. I think Penn State, we've seen they've taken the approach of trying to build through recruiting primarily, and then the portal to kind of fill those holes.
Just the little gaps in between,
Right.
I mean, Franklin's always been, a top recruiter, top-tier recruiter. He always has class after class. It's like guys just filling the holes or, pushing people to do better so these people don't take over their spots. But, he's always been a good recruiter, and I think he stays out of the portal just because he likes what he has in-house a lot of the time. And so I think that plays a big role too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it, but I also think with the NIL and just his reluctance to do anything that's outside of the rules of the NIL was affecting things at first, but I think it's getting better. I think with NIL rules changing, with how you can do the deals and everything, I think it makes things easier for Penn State to kind of get guys in. So I think you'll see maybe an uptick next year in recruits or guys from the transfer portal that they're able to pull. But at the same time, I think that Franklin will keep a lot of the stuff in-house and anything that he's getting from recruiting.
Yeah. I mean, I like what you said about them kind of sticking to the traditional, I guess, playing by the rule book in terms of recruiting. Right, but I mean, he hasn't been afraid to kind of call out other teams for tampering.
Yeah.
I mean, he's said in the past, that schools have made offers to some of the players on Penn State's roster, which is pretty interesting. But supposedly, according to Franklin, Penn State doesn't do it. You can believe that. You don't have to. It's up to you. I feel like most schools in some capacity.
Yeah, I'd say about 99%. Yeah.
I mean, even Nick Saban. I don't know if you saw. He had like that quote. I forget who he was talking about. He was talking about one player that Alabama was
with
offering,
the Ferrari.
who wasn't even in the portal yet.
Oh yeah,
Like he just admitted to it. It was like you can't actually do that. But he's retired now, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. But that was kind of funny because I thought Alabama maybe would be a little bit above that. But I think
yeah.
every team in some capacity is doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's been a thing forever though. College football
Yeah.
has always been money here, a lot of stuff under the table and I think part of it is the coverage of it because there's only so much you can get. Like even when you talk about injuries, you don't really know much about injuries until game day. I think team dynamics is really hard to get sources because college sports is a moving thing. Like players are always in and out. It's hard to, establish those relationships to kind of get those scoops and things. So I think it's always been harder to kind of know what's really going on in college football. So a lot of people are shocked, but I wouldn't say I'm shocked, especially with the top teams, because some people say if you're not cheating, you're not trying. I'm not saying that's my philosophy sometimes, but it's not my philosophy if it's not Madden. So, I mean, but I do think that it's something that a lot of different teams use.
Yeah, for sure. Avery gonna be pulling some under the table deals when the new college football game comes out.
I'm getting all 5 stars. I'm not playing. I'm not playing.
Number 1 recruiting class.
I could be at Old Dominion, all 5 stars.
You going with Old Dominion?
Probably Old Dominion. That was my usual team. Old Dominion.
Nice.
Sometimes I do Army just to do it. I think I'll redo Maryland because I don't think they're doing things right now. I think I'll get them together. Yeah.
So Millen V Reports asks, what player will surprise Penn State and elevate the defense the most this year?
Honestly, I think you got to go with Denai Dennis Sutton. We just talked about him. Potential first-round pick. I mean, he sat behind – well, not really sat, but he played behind Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac. He was, third team All-Big Ten, and they had, player on the first, second, and third team at the defensive end position. And, I mean, Manny Diaz is gone, but I think Tom Allen steps right in and replicates what he got out of his defensive ends. I think now you put Denai on one end and Abdul Carter on the other end. One, that takes that responsibility off of Denai to be that top guy. So I think he'll up production. He had, 3.5 sacks last year, 2 forced fumbles. I think he can easily get that up to 7.5, maybe 8. I mean, forced fumbles, you're not going to get more than 2 in a year. But I think it'll be a really good year because he'll be able to up his production. I think he'll really surprise some fans.
For sure. Our next question is from Ben P2237. Do you see a scenario if Drew struggles that Bo gets a chance to start?
I'm going to say no, just because blue-white game, Bo didn't really impress that much. Any pass play, I mean, his O-line wasn't great.
I hated how they used him in that game.
Yeah.
They ran him, but they weren't playing tackle. It was...
Yeah, it was, and then even last year, anytime he got game action, they would not let him throw the ball at all. It was just run. And, I mean, he's proven he can be a mobile quarterback, but you still, you got to run and throw. It's not just a one-dimensional thing, and throwing is, the biggest part of being a quarterback. So I honestly think that if Drew struggles, I don't really see a scenario where Bo comes in. I think maybe if Drew struggles, they try to, incorporate Bo, more, but I don't think he ever would pass Drew on the depth chart or anything like that. I think it's Drew's job for the whole year. So
that's it for today's episode. I'm Joel Haas.
I'm Avery Hill.
I'm Lexie Linderman.
Thank you for watching. For more football coverage, you can follow us at psucollegian.com and follow our socials.
See ya.